This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Scoresheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Hello and welcome to another Scoresheet podcast. Today we have the lead baseball writer for Yahoo Sports with us, Jeff Passan. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Along with being a baseball writer for Yahoo and keeping us all abreast of the things, Jeff is also a rather avid Scoresheet team owner. You're in a league that, in fact, just did some sort of draft in the last week or two, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in the early bird BL league, and it is unlike any fantasy league I've ever been in. The format is fantastic. It's an auction format with a salary cap, with growing raise scales for players you can keep long term, and more than that, the draft actually happens before most free agents are signed. And so a lot of guys out there, you're just going completely blind on, hoping that they're going to either end up in a friendly park for pitchers, a friendly park for hitters, and you're hoping the hitters don't go to San Diego and the pitchers don't go to Texas. And so there's a lot of speculation. There's a ton of trades and maneuvering and activity. And of all the fantasy leagues I've been in just a regular straight rotisserie league with my friends from home for 20 years plus now. So that one is nearest and dearest to my heart. But as far as Scoresheet goes, and I've fallen in love with the game, I think this is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, it's one of the only salary-oriented Scoresheet leagues. And when we started Scoresheet, it was all straight draft. And there's a few private leagues that do salary caps, but even among the private leagues, private meaning that groups of guys get together themselves, salary caps are still kind of rarity in Scoresheet, but it's working well in early bird, huh?
It is. It's been an interesting last year or so because the way that the rules were written, there were some transactions toward the end of last season that led a lot of the league's membership to sort of question whether the right mechanisms are in place in order to keep teams in contention and to have teams at the end of the year not just trying to dump and shed payroll in order to free it up for late season drafts. And so last year, toward the end of the season, we got Evan Longoria and Prince Fielder, for example, in a draft. And it turns out they went for market price. There was a lot of concern that the market was just going to be flaccid at that point in the year. There's one guy named Andy. Andy is called Trader Andy because there is not a deal that Andy will not pull off. And Andy got Troy Tulowitzki at pretty low under market. And that's the sort of deal that, you can anchor your team around for years to come. But beyond that, I think that most of the concerns were alleviated, and that's the fun part of a league that has a salary cap and that has a fluid market that you can go in and get steals sometimes when teams are trying to juggle the salary cap that they have. Right now, we have an 8-round draft, and we have a $100 million cap. Right now, my partner Mark Pesavento and I are at, I believe, $96.4 million. So we're trying to figure out how to fill a bullpen and get some backups with $3.6 million. We're also juggling potential trades. We're always looking to upgrade, to trade. We have a pretty good cash prospects. And so it's fascinating and it's fun. And the format of this league really is great.
So unlike the LA Dodgers, you guys actually have to pay attention to how much money you're spending.
You do. Yeah, no unlimited spending. There's no $147 million contracts for Zach Greinke. I think the biggest contract I've ever seen was Albert Pujols getting $28.6 million a year. And those big contracts can turn troublesome very quickly, just because more than anything, they're difficult to move. And if you're spending 30% of your roster, which is a 40-man roster now, it expands to 45 after opening day. I'll tell you, it's difficult to go forward because, there are penalties for guys getting cut, and you have to pay your prospects still. It's definitely a very challenging league that makes you strategize more than any I've been in.
Yeah, well, it sounds interesting. I noticed you have Tim Lincecum on your team. I was looking at your roster. How much are you having to pay him after last year?
We traded for Lincecum as a definite buy low candidate. Trader Andy has the Trader nickname, but we like making deals ourselves. I think we got Lincecum as part of a bigger package, and he was on a, I believe, rookie contract still. Maybe it was one of those where we have a provision. It's called diamond in the rough. And if you draft a guy, you can assign him a diamond in the rough standing, and that extends him beyond what the normal contract limits are. And the normal contract limits are 4 years after your rookie season. But Lincecum got extended, and he's, I believe, at $3.7 million this year and $4.4 million for next year. And look, it's a risk, but it's one we were pretty happy to take, because if he can be anything like old Tim Lincecum, then $3.7 million is a bargain.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of his numbers are pretty encouraging. He kept his strikeout rate up there right around 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. It's, I guess
the walks were terrible, though.
Yeah, the walks were really bad, and
the walks were bad.
Of course, the talk out here is that maybe he's just as thin as he is, and he obviously never works out. That maybe he's just going to have to be moved to the bullpen, which. If he became the next Dennis Eckersley and was the best closer in baseball for the next 5 years, that would be an okay development, I guess.
It would, and look, we saw how creative Bruce Bochy was during the playoffs, the way that he used him in a multi-inning role. And it would be completely against everything that goes on in baseball these days for him to do that. But look, Bruce Bochy's a creative guy, and if he's got Brian Sabean's backing, and you can throw Tim Lincecum out there for 3 dominant innings every 3 or 4 days, you wonder whether going back to an old-time real relief role where you have multiple innings from a dominant pitcher would be good use of Lincecum. If he's getting knocked around and if his velocity's down as a starter, then he thrived in that role in the playoffs, and he was obviously open to it. I know he wants to start. That's where the money is. That's where the glory is. That's where his greatest success was. But it's nice to have that fallback option.
Yeah, well, Bochy would be the guy to do something a little innovative, because after winning 2 World Series in 3 years, he could do about whatever he wants for the next 3-4 years, and with no danger of being fired.
Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't he have more than 3 or 4 years? Isn't it one of those like lifetime contracts at this point? Two championships in 3 years in a place that had been starved for a championship pretty much makes you the mayor of the city.
Yeah, no, I think he's there, as long as he wants to be. And even Brian Sabean, who's of course taken lots of heat over the years, he's in the same boat now. He can claim those 2 championships also. So I think he's got about as much job security as any GM could have.
Yeah. And you know what? Look, I've been critical of Brian Sabean in the past. He's won 2 championships in 3 years. Pretty tough to argue with that. And whether it was by luck, by happenstance, or by the fact that it's just a well-run organization that's emphasized and prioritized the right thing, I'd say it's more of the latter than the former these days.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge Giants fan, but even I would say that probably in both those years, no one would have said at the end of September the Giants were the best team in baseball. But 10, 20 years from now, when people ask me how many rings do the Giants have, I'm not going to care if they were the best team in 2010 or 12 in the regular season. I'm just going to say, well, we got 2 rings for sure.
Yeah, you know what? Flags fly forever. And it's, I didn't criticize them when they gave up Zach Wheeler for Carlos Beltran 2 years ago, because I feel like that championship window is small. And I think Lincecum this year showed why that's the case, because pitchers can break down. And if your team is based around pitching, then there's a chance that the arms are going to die, that guy's going to not be as effective as he was. And if you have that, if you have that core in place, then go for it. That's what the Royals did last night. The Royals said, we have a core in place and we're going for it now. And they've been getting a whole lot of criticism and flack, but I know on the internet the general sense was this was a terrible franchise-wrecking move. But in my mind, they did what they had to do, and they paid a heavy price for it, and that's what happens when you go after a guy like James Shields, who has as many good quality innings as he does.
Yeah, no, I don't think, that you can read pretty much any opinion on that. I read your article, and yeah, you were defending the trade. I think that I was thinking about the trade in Scoresheet terms. If I was a Scoresheet owner and I made the trade from the KC side, I'd be pretty happy because in Scoresheet, in most of our leagues that don't have salary caps anyhow, I could hold James Shields for as long as he's a good pitcher.
Yep.
The drawback in real life is that Will Myers, of course, is under team control for 6 years and very cheap years for the first three, whereas James Shields is a free agent in 2 years and is making 10, 11 million a year. So I think the trade might be viewed a little differently in real life than in a Scoresheet contact.
Absolutely, and look, it's not just the 6+ years of Will Myers; it's 6+ years of Jake Odorizzi and of Mike Montgomery. I mean, these are guys who, Myers isn't going to come up until May, but when he does, he will be up essentially. He will be the Rays' property for 6 years and 5 months. And if he's anything like what scouts think he can be, then this is going to be a trade that's looked back upon by baseball observers and Royals fans as a bellwether for the franchise. James Shields needs to lead this team to the playoffs in order for this trade to be worth it. I live in Kansas City. I've been here more than 5 years now, and it's been 27 years since they've had any whiff of the postseason. And so when you have Salvador Perez, who I think is going to be an absolute superstar, and Eric Hosmer and Alcides Escobar and Mike Moustakas and Alex Gordon and Lorenzo Cain and Billy Butler, when you have a core like that, you need pitching, and they didn't have pitching. And you can't let that core go to waste when you have that much talent getting into its prime. And so did the Royals pay a hefty price? No question about it. But did they do so with the right intentions in mind? I think that they did.
It quite likely could be a trade that's actually good for both teams.
Yep.
I think Tampa Bay has it's almost certainly going to be good for them because one of those prospects, I mean, Myers is probably going to be really good, and if not, Odorizzi or Montgomery might be good. So, and they didn't need Shields and Davis as much as Kansas City does. They have a rather large number of good pitchers. And if Kansas City makes the playoffs this year or the next 2 years, then they got, like you said, flags fly forever. They have to consider it a win. If they flop on their face and come in third or fourth place again, and 5 years from now Will Myers is the best player in baseball, then they might feel bad.
Yes, they probably would. But if 5 years from now Will Myers is the best player in baseball, Tampa Bay is going to be trading him anyway.
Yeah, well, that's true. No, I think it's interesting. And the other big news, obviously, is how much money the Dodgers are spending. But, if this new TV contract they have, if the prices that are being thrown around are correct, that they're really going to get $200 to $250 million a year for their local TV rights, then why not sign Greinke and every other free agent they can think of? Money is almost no object when you're suddenly getting $200 million in a local TV contract.
You'd like to think that there's a point at which they stop, but a day after they spend $147 million on Zach Greinke, they go and turn around and spend more than $60 million on Hyunjin Ryu. And so, you just wonder, it's $200 million plus in pitching within 2 days. The world went crazy when the Angels spent $322 million on Albert Pujols and C.J. Wilson in back-to-back days. Well, it's like spending $300 million is what the Dodgers do every day. It's like they just go shopping and they get whatever they want. And, I don't know that it's good for baseball. I pointed this out on Twitter that right now the Dodgers have more than $200 million in contracts on their books for the 2013 season, and the Houston Astros have $800,000. Yeah. I don't know if that's good for the sport necessarily. It damn sure is fascinating, though, and I think the Dodgers going forward are going to be a remarkable study of efficiency or inefficiency, of money spent versus return, of handling the big market pressure, of expectations versus truth, of all of these fascinating factors, these intangibles that you can break them down sabermetrically and they won't show up, but they are ever present with this team.
Like you mentioned, the Angels, they spent a ton of money last year and didn't even make the playoffs. So the Dodgers have taken it to where it's virtually every position. I think the only reason they're not being talked about for getting Josh Hamilton is because where would they put him?
Yeah, I mean they've already got $42 million worth of Yasiel Puig in no position to play him. With Carl Crawford, with Matt Kemp, with Andre Ethier, Puig is sort of stuck. And considering the outlay that they had for him, I think that to me says as much about the Dodgers as anything. That they're willing to spend $40 million on a kid who has never played a game of organized baseball in the United States, and not only that, they don't have a spot for him.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I wonder whether finally between the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Angels, if baseball will finally move a little bit towards a salary cap, though.
No chance ever, never, 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 never,
Because the
never
players
happening.
players
Yep.
simply won't agree to it. You figure?
Players wouldn't let it happen. I think that look, I don't know that the owners would want it to happen either. A salary cap would be nice in theory for balancing things out, but look at the winners of the last few years of the World Series. I know you have a Yankees mixed in there. I know there's a Red Sox somewhere in there, but San Francisco Giants, while being a big market club, aren't necessarily run like a behemoth. I'm not saying that baseball's equality is like the NFL's. It's not even close. And I think that chasm has gotten bigger with some of these new television contracts, but I also don't know that we're at the point now where it's necessary to panic and say salary cap, salary cap, salary cap. It'll save everything, because I'm not sure that it will.
It might not work. Well, as like I said, as a Giants fan, I rarely say good things about the Dodgers, but I will give their ownership credit. They could have taken that TV contract because if I read it right, it's something like a 20-year contract. They could have just pocketed that money, and made $100 million a year in profit and not spend it. So they are at least doing what fans of a team want their ownership to do, which is spend as much money as they possibly can.
Absolutely. And I think that Dodgers fans right now are giddy. And they should be. Coming from ownership with Frank McCourt,
Yeah.
where it was the lowest of the low, and where your baseball team was essentially dragged into a, dirty, nasty divorce, and you had an owner trying to sell off his television rights for 50% of what they're worth in order to save himself. The fact that Frank McCourt got $1 billion in the end just cracks me up. Like, of all the American greedy things to happen, we can look at Wall Street, but I'm not sure anything is more indicative of the business state of America than Frank McCourt running a company into the toilet, flushing it like 50 times, and making sure that it goes all the way deep down into the sewer, and then getting $1 billion for that.
No, he came out smelling like roses. Well, I wonder what Jeff Luria down there in Florida, he'll probably end up somehow coming out of all of it a few years from now. We'll look back and say, gee, he did fine.
God, I hope not.
Well,
I really do. I really don't.
it would be very hard to be a Marlins fan, don't you think?
Yes, I have no doubt about it. I have heard from plenty of them, both decrying stuff that I have written, and then finally, after the last fire sale, saying, okay, you were right. And I feel bad for him. I do. It's how can you root for that team? How can you root for an ownership group that goes and does what it did to get that stadium built and now dismantles the team? It's embarrassing and it's sad.
Yeah, when you take taxpayer money to build a stadium, and one year into it, you've turned your team into the minor leaguers. It's they're down there, just apparently not even trying to win. Whatever they say about building for the future, they're really building for nothing. It seems like.
I mean, look, they've got some good pieces in place, but what they said, it was essentially, if you build it, we will spend, and they spent for pretty much 2/3 of one season, and now they're back to their old skinflint ways. It's an embarrassment, and I'm just sad for baseball fans in South Florida that they have to deal with it, and that if they want to go to a baseball game, they know that they are funding crooks.
No, it's a sad thing down there. But it's one great thing about baseball. Here it is. It's a couple months after the World Series ended, a couple months before spring training even starts, and meanwhile the papers and the web and radio, talk shows, everybody's full of baseball news right now, which is, I think, one of the things that makes baseball a great sport to follow.
I was talking with Don Fear. God, it was probably 2 weeks ago now when Marvin Miller died. He said something I thought was very poignant. It's like free agency is necessary for the players and was an important thing to leverage baseball going forward, but it's not why players are rich right now. The money was coming one way or another when money in sports grew. What free agency did was it made the offseason a commodity and it made the offseason interesting. Without free agency right now, is anyone really talking about baseball? I mean, maybe if there's a big trade with James Shields and Will Myers, but otherwise, the commoditization of the offseason, I think, ties in directly to that. And look, as a baseball fan, I'm glad that we can talk about baseball when it's 20 degrees outside. Well, at least it's like 20 degrees here. I don't know what it's like in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You got to add about 40 degrees to that.
All right. Well, thanks for rubbing it in. That's not very nice.
Well, that's all right. But no, I agree. Because I doubt that we'd be spending a lot of time talking about the Rule 5 draft if that was the biggest news in December.
I was going to say, how much time did we spend talking about the Rule 5 draft? About as many minutes as there are rules?
Yeah, it's just, well, some years there's an exciting player too, but it doesn't seem like this year that the next Jose Bautista just got picked up by somebody.
Yeah, that would be true. And it still just kills me how Jose Bautista, one of the best power hitters in the game these days, bounced around to I believe it was 4 different teams.
Yeah.
And here he was with the Pirates, he was with the Royals, he was with the Mets. I think he was with the Rays and back to the Pirates. I mean, it's staggering. It really is.
Well, and all bad teams. It's not like the Yankees cut him because they didn't have room for him. He was, you just read off a list of teams that pretty much during the time he was with them were all bottom feeders, and even they couldn't find a use for him.
It was my first year, I believe, covering baseball back in 2004. And Jose Bautista rolls through, and it's right around the same time as the Royals are making other deals. I think they traded Carlos Beltran for Mark Teahen and John Buck and Mike Wood around then. And so there are new faces everywhere, and they're trying to overhaul things, and Bautista just couldn't get at bats. When he did get at bats, they weren't very good, and he was an expendable piece. He was young. He had talent. He had tools, but he wasn't performing at the big league level. And lo and behold, when you can't do that, a lot of teams are going to say, sorry, kid, can't keep you around.
When he blossomed, though. That's for sure. Well, Jeff, it's been great talking to you. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Look forward to it. Appreciate the time and the questions and having me on. It was a lot of fun, Jeff.
Good. Well, thanks for being on. We'll see you all later.